Level 1, the decision. Nobody leaves home because they want to. Sometimes, life leaves you no choice. For months, jobs disappeared. Bills piled up. Every morning began with hope and ended with disappointment. One evening, you sat alone in a small apartment. The lights were off to save electricity. Your phone showed another rejected job application, another interview, another, "We're sorry." You looked around the empty room. There wasn't much left. Just a backpack, a few clothes, some old family photos, and a dream. To start over somewhere safe. That night, a friend called. "There may be a legal opportunity to travel and work abroad," he said. "It won't be easy. It could take months. But if you're willing to try, this might change your future." You didn't answer right away. Leaving meant saying goodbye to everything familiar. Your home, your neighborhood, your memories. The next morning, you walked through the streets one last time. Every corner reminded you of your childhood. You stopped outside your old school. You smiled. Then you kept walking. Back home. You packed your backpack carefully. One jacket, a bottle of water, important documents, and one family photograph. Before closing the door, you looked back at the empty room. You whispered, "I hope I come back one day." The bus arrived before sunrise. Its engine echoed through the quiet streets. You climbed aboard as the city disappeared behind you. Fear and hope traveled together. You didn't know what was waiting ahead. Only one thing was certain. Your journey had just begun. Level 2, the long road, begins next. Level 2, the long road. The bus kept moving. Hour after hour. The city disappeared behind you. Tall buildings became open fields. The roads became quieter. Every mile took you farther from the life you had always known. Inside the bus, nobody talked very much. Some passengers stared out the window. Others held family photos in their hands. Everyone carried a different story. But they all shared the same dream. A better future. As evening arrived, the bus stopped at a small roadside town. You stepped outside. The air felt different, cooler, quieter. You bought a bottle of water. It was one of the last things you could afford. That night, you sat on a wooden bench. You opened your backpack. Everything you owned fit inside it. One jacket, a family photograph, important papers, and hope. The next morning, the journey continued. The road climbed into the mountains. Fog covered the trees. The scenery was beautiful, but your mind was full of questions. Did I make the right decision? What if I fail? What if I never see home again? No one could answer. Late in the afternoon, the bus reached the final stop. Beyond that point, the road ended. You stood quietly, looking toward the distant horizon. You had never been so far from home. Your journey had become real. There was no turning back now. You took a deep breath, adjusted your backpack, and began walking toward an uncertain future. One step at a time. Level 3. Survival begins next. Level 3, the hardest journey. The road ended. Now, only nature stood in front of you. There were no buses, no cities, no comfortable places to rest, only endless hills, rocky paths, and silence. Every step became harder. Your backpack felt heavier than ever. The sun climbed higher. The heat grew stronger. Your bottle of water was almost empty. You stopped for a moment. Your legs were shaking. You looked at the family photo inside your backpack. It reminded you why you couldn't give up. You stood again and kept walking. Hours passed. The path became steeper. The wind grew colder. Dark clouds slowly covered the sky. A light rain began to fall. Your clothes became wet. Your boots were covered with mud. You slipped. but quickly stood up again. Giving up was never an option as night arrived. You found an old wooden shelter beside the trail. It wasn't much, but it protected you from the rain. You sat quietly, listening to the wind outside. For the first time since leaving home, you felt completely alone. You closed your eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." Early the next morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. You picked up your backpack, smiled quietly, and continued forward, because every difficult step was bringing you closer to a new beginning. Level 4, a new hope, begins next. Level 4, a new hope. The morning air felt fresh for the first time in days. The sun felt warm instead of harsh. You continued walking. The trail slowly led into a quiet forest. Birds sang above the trees. The silence felt peaceful. After hours of walking, you found a small stream. The clear water reflected the blue sky. You knelt beside it, washed the dust from your face. For a brief moment, life felt normal again. As you rested, you noticed another traveler sitting beneath a tree. He looked just as tired as you. Neither of you spoke at first. Then he smiled. "Long journey." You nodded. He offered you a piece of bread. You shared your last apple. No questions, no judgments. Just two strangers helping each other. They walked together through the forest. The path became easier. The heavy feeling of being alone started to disappear as the sun began to set. They reached a hill. From the top, they could see a distant town. Its lights glowed in the evening. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it reminded them that every difficult road eventually leads somewhere. The wind carried hope. You smiled for the first time since leaving home. Tomorrow would bring another challenge, but tonight, you believed in yourself again. Level 5, the final test. The town disappeared behind you. The road became rough again. Cold winds swept across the hills. The sky turned grey for the first time in days. You felt completely exhausted. Every step became slower. Your backpack felt heavier. Your legs ached, but stopping wasn't an option. By afternoon, dark clouds covered the mountains. A powerful storm arrived. Heavy rain poured from the sky. The trail became slippery. Strong winds pushed against you. You held onto a tree, trying not to fall. Your companion shouted, "Keep moving." Together, you climbed higher. Lightning flashed across the sky. Thunder echoed through the valley. For a moment, everything disappeared behind the rain. Then, you noticed a small wooden cabin. Both of you rushed toward it. Inside, it was old, cold, and empty, but it was safe. You built a small fire. Your wet clothes slowly dried. The storm continued outside. That night, you looked through the cabin window. The mountains looked endless. Your companion smiled. "We've come too far to quit now." You smiled back. For the first time, you truly believed the journey would have an ending. The next morning, the storm was gone. The sky was bright blue. Fresh sunlight covered the mountains. You picked up your backpack, opened the cabin door, and took another step forward. Because every challenge you survived made you stronger. The hardest part was almost over. Level 6, a new beginning. The mountains were finally behind you. For the first time, the road became smooth. The air felt warmer. The silence was different. It no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. You kept walking. Every step reminded you how far you had come. You thought about your old life, the small apartment, the empty wallet, the sleepless nights. It all felt so far away. By noon, you reached a quiet village. Children were playing in the streets. Families smiled at one another. Life seemed simple. You sat on a wooden bench, closed your eyes, and took a deep breath. A kind elderly woman noticed how tired you looked. She handed you a warm bowl of soup. You smiled. Thank you. She smiled back. Everyone deserves kindness. Those words stayed with you. As the sun began to set, you climbed one last hill. From the top, you looked across the wide valley. The journey had changed you. You were stronger, braver, more hopeful. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. Not because life would become easy, but because you had learned. You could survive difficult days. You adjusted your backpack, looked toward the horizon, and kept moving forward. This journey had become the beginning of a brand new life. Level 7, a new home. The road stretched ahead, but something felt different. For the first time, you weren't afraid of what came next. The morning sun rose behind the mountains. The air felt fresh. Every step carried hope instead of fear. After hours of walking, you reached a small community center. People from different countries sat together. Some smiled, some cried, some simply looked relieved. A volunteer greeted you. Welcome. Those single words meant more than anything you had heard in years. You sat down. Someone handed you clean clothes. Another person offered a warm meal. For the first time in weeks, you didn't have to worry about where you would sleep. That evening, you looked through the window. Children were laughing outside. Families were talking together. Life continued. You realized something. Home isn't always the place you leave behind. Sometimes, home is the place where hope returns. The next morning, you received news that your documents would be reviewed. The future was still uncertain. But now, you had a chance. You picked up your backpack. It was lighter than ever. Not because there was less inside, but because the weight on your heart was finally gone. You smiled. Your journey was almost complete. Level 8, a new life. The sun slowly rose. Its golden light covered the valley. For the first time in a long time, you woke up without fear. No rushing, no hiding, no wondering what would happen next. Just peace. You stepped outside. The morning air felt fresh. Birds sang in the trees. Children laughed nearby. Life was moving forward. So were you. Days passed. You started learning new skills. Every morning became another opportunity. You met people from different countries. Each carried a different story, but all of them shared one thing: hope. One afternoon, you found a quiet bench in a small park. You opened your old backpack. Inside, the same family photograph, the same jacket, the same memories, but something had changed. You smiled, because you were no longer the frightened person who had left home months ago. You had become stronger, kinder, more patient. You understood that the hardest journeys don't only change where you live, they change who you become. As the seasons changed, you found steady work. You rented a small apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was yours. One evening, you stood by the window. The city lights stretched into the distance. They reminded you of the night you had left everything behind. Back then, you carried fear. Now, you carried hope. You picked up the family photograph, placed it on the shelf, and quietly whispered, "I made it." The journey wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But every difficult step, every sleepless night, every challenge had led you here. Sometimes, the greatest destination isn't a place. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be. A new country didn't create your future. Your courage did. The end